Starting out by negging me.
Yeah. That's how I keep you around. I need you to rely on me for your self-esteem.
It's the way it's always been. It's the way it'll always be.
1, 2, 3, 4.
If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Welcome to It Chooses You, the podcast where we discuss the stories, ideas, and delights that make life worth living.
I'm Claire Patton.
And I'm Teresa Sparks.
And this is our podcast.
We like telling each other stories, and we like a bunch of different things, and we know people who like a bunch of different things. And I mean, like, they like things as we don't. And we like things they don't. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to, explain to me why you think that's cool.
Right.
Like, explain yourself is sort of my direction with it. My intent is, tell me why you like that.
Yeah. Maybe
I'll like it too. There's a story that's very important to me that I like very much. Let's just be really clear here. I don't know anything about what I'm about to talk about.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
It's going to be so real, man.
Yeah. I think it's resonant because he and I share some characteristics.
So what's the story?
This is a story of Donald Crowhurst and the London Sunday Times round the world single-handed sailing race of 1967.
May I ask before you start, how did you discover this story?
Sure, I discovered it watching YouTube.
All right. What had you searched for? Or what rabbit hole did you go down?
Yeah, I went...
Do you remember?
Yeah,
it's hard to know.
I do very clearly, yeah. I'm really into disasters, not like being in them.
Right.
Or watching other people be in them. I don't enjoy that, but I like reading about them. And I like watching... There are lots of people on YouTube who make tiny videos about disasters all the time and who post disaster documentaries. And I found a documentary called Deep Water, which is all about him. And I watched it, and then I watched it again, and then I watched it again, and then I kept watching it and kept reading, and...
So here we are.
To tell the story of Donald Crowhurst, I have to tell you about Francis Chichester. So Francis Chichester was an actual sailor. Which is so mean. I'm sorry, Don. I don't mean it. It was an actual sailor who was the first person to sail single-handed around the world. Single-handed just means you do it by yourself. You don't have crew.
Do you have to be alone on the boat?
You have to be alone on the boat. No one there to help you.
Okay.
And so I say it just means being alone, but that's actually the main issue. Because it's
the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. It's hard to sail a boat by yourself. I'm told.
Right.
Never been on
the high seas.
The gap between my interest and my ability is revealed once again.
Right.
So he was an experienced sailor. He'd won a solo transatlantic yacht race past, and he decided he was going to commission a boat to be built to do this. So he did, and he was successful. He sailed around the world. So he started in England. He sailed south through the Atlantic. He sailed east across the Southern Ocean, Indian Ocean, to Australia, through the Pacific East, around Cape Horn, and back up through the Atlantic. He was successful, but his boat took such a beating in the Southern Ocean that he stopped in Australia for a couple months and did extensive repairs and refits to the boat before he continued. And so when he got home, hundreds of thousands of people were just lining the beaches, welcoming him, and he was immediately knighted. Women loved him, men wanted to be him. I imagine there was cocaine, but probably not. But I really want to think he came home and was like, party!
It might have been ticker
60s.
tape, which is the cocaine of the, where are we? What time period?
67 is when he did it.
Yeah. Ticker tape is the cocaine of 1967.
Yeah, that checks out.
That's historical fact.
It is, yeah. Because he did those refits, when he got home, everyone was like, this guy's amazing, but the next thing is you gotta do it without stopping. And that's a bigger challenge, because the boat takes a beating. Person takes a beating, boat takes a beating. So it was, there's this sense in the 60s that we were discovering things, we were orbiting the Earth, we were planning trips to the moon, we'd orbited the moon already, and there were sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's the late 60s, and so this was the next accomplishment, like human accomplishment. And this is where we meet Don Crowhurst. Poor Donald Crowhurst.
Also rich, I imagine.
No.
So now we're hitting now I'm wondering if this is about a working class person trying to accomplish the feats of the wealthy, without their resources.
That might be a way of framing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So Don Crowhurst was born in British India. His dad worked for the railway and his mom was a school teacher. Lower middle class. Mm-hmm. But in India, British colonial overlords, middle class is fine. You can still live like kings, right? He was born in 1932. His mother really wanted a girl and was convinced the whole time she was pregnant that he was going to be a girl. And when he was born, she dressed him like a girl for the first 7 years of his life and did not cut his hair. That's not actually relevant to the story. I just think it's interesting. So when he was 7, she finally bowed to pressure, I guess, and cut his hair and put him in some pants. And someone gave him a toy sailboat at that time, probably his parents. There's a photo of him as a 7-year-old boy standing there with the biggest smile on his face, holding the sailboat. And he's just absolutely thrilled. It's a lovely photo. He's obviously just completely in love. And so for me, the fact that he was dressed as a girl until he got his first sailboat is somehow psychologically relevant in a way also I know nothing about. So when India threw off her colonial shackles, they said, oh, we should get out of here. And they came back to England, the whole family. He was 8 or 9 at the time. So when they moved back to England, they thought they had enough money to live for a while, but they lost some retirement savings in an uprising that burned down the factory they invested in, and they ran out of money really quickly, and they were broke. That was it. It was over. And so these people who were now in late middle age, Crowhurst's parents, his father had to get a job as a porter, carrying heavy things in his 50s and 60s.
Where do porters work? I've never understood. Do they work for factories?
They work carrying luggage mostly.
Okay.
They are luggage carriers. So they
like
work for
busboy?
cruise lines or for hotels or for railway lines unloading boxes. They're basically teamsters. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes.
Okay, good. I know you're smart, but I also know I like labor history more than you do too. On a future episode.
On the riveting season finale.
Yes, on the Jimmy Hoffa episode, we will discuss Teamsters. So when they came back, his father took this menial job and almost immediately died. Had a heart attack and died.
Oh, God.
And so Donald had to leave school at 16. So I guess it's not immediately when he came back. Again, I'm real fuzzy about his early life, so forgive me. But he definitely left school at 16. He was really well liked by his classmates. He was always leading the adventures. I called him a good time Charlie. He's like the guy who's at the party doing the little dance for everybody and just needs an audience and wants everybody to be happy.
Always brought the ticker tape.
Always brought the ticker tape to the party, that's right. God, I would have hated him because I hate that guy at the party who just will not chill. He became a pilot in the Royal Air Force, but he lost his commission for some reason. Doesn't say. He then joined the army and was asked to leave after he was caught trying to steal a car. But he was trying to steal it as a joke. His friends bet him that he wasn't mechanically able enough to hotwire a car, and he was like, yeah, I am. Oh. And he went to do it, and the cop was like, excuse me, sir. And he tried to run and jumped into a canal, and they caught him, and he was asked to leave the army. He'd studied electronics in both services, so he decided that he was going to set himself up in business at making electronic devices of some kind and selling them. He didn't do very well at it, but he was making a living. And this is really important. He was legitimately intelligent. He was smart. His friends and his teachers all say he could fix anything that was broken. He had a really keen understanding of electrical circuits and electrical mechanics and those sorts of things. And his writing about God and what it means to be a person when he was in school at 16 sounds like he's 45. I mean, he's really emotionally mature, perhaps because of various things that occurred in his childhood and the early death of his father. He's doing this thing. He's kissing all the ladies. And then he meets a girl whose name is Claire.
Oh, wow, that's my name.
Yeah. Okay, so he gets married to a woman called Claire. And she seems like the kind of person we'd be friends with. They interviewed her for this documentary, which is part of why I like it. That documentary, Deep Water, talked to his friends, and it's really a compassionate take on the situation. It's really easy, as you'll see as we get into this, really easy to make fun of him or dismiss it or be hard or cruel about it because he did some things that are pretty questionable. She's interviewed in it, which indicates how well they treated the material because she was willing to do that. And she's warm and funny and sad. So they get together and they have 4 kids. He has a job that doesn't really do anything. He's married and he has 4 children and he's not really making any money. So then Chichester comes home. He's a hero. And basically right after that, the London Sunday Times says, okay, now we're going to sponsor an around-the-world single-handed sailing race, and the person to do it fastest wins $5,000 pounds. And I did look it up. It's about 36,000 pounds today. He entered the race 4 days after the announcement. He was on it. He was like, I'm going to do this.
Had he ever sailed before?
What a great question. He had a little boat that he sailed up and down the channels in England, and maybe had sailed in the sea a little bit. But as far as I can tell, he hadn't even crossed the English Channel in a boat, much less sail it by himself across the channel.
So, are there motors on these boats that they're using, or are they just sailboats, right?
I think they're just sailboats.
Okay.
There may be small motors that you need to sort of direct yourself when you pull into dock and port, is what they call it, and then a dock. So he's sailed a little bit. In the documentary, someone's like, basically he was a weekend sailor. And he's like, I'm going to sail around the world. Okay? So not only that, I'm going to sail around the world. I'm going to enter this race. I'm going to design the boat that I sail around the world. And I'm going to have the boat built. And that's going to be how the way the documentary frames it, this was his chance to like do something with his life, right? So he's like, not only am I going to sail, I'm going to design and build the boat to do it. Now, they announced the race in March of 1967. And they said that you had to set... It wasn't like a normal race. It didn't have like a starting line and a finish line. People didn't start at the same time. But what they did was they said, sail around the world, you have to leave between the 1st of June and October 31st. You have to leave sometime in that window. And then when you get back, you can claim that you did it, but you got to show us your logs to prove it, right? And so sailors take logs when they're out there. They take sun sights, and they use an astrolabe to take star sightings so they know where they are. There's no navigational satellites. There's no cell phones. He decides he's going to do it. He's going to design the boat. And then he's like, wait a minute. I don't have any money. And boats are expensive to build. So he starts looking for a sponsor. And he finds one because he's Good Time Charlie. He's the life of the party.
Right.
Like, he can convince anyone of anything. And he's really smart. So I imagine also pretty good at manipulating people. Not that I relate to that. And so he finds a sponsor who is basically like a used car dealer who was into the idea of being a part of something so wonderful. Mm-hmm. He also draws some attention from newspaper dudes who are willing to help him by publicizing all the things he's doing. So we'll publicize you. You're our homegrown, Britain loves an underdog. That's how we'll sell it, whatever. So he finds a sponsor and he gets some press attention. And they build this boat that he designed. And he designed a trimaran, which has 3 hulls. It's a center and then 2 floats on the side. And they're fast, he was like, I'm going to win the money. I need to do it fast. Unfortunately, as everyone who is an actual sailor knows, trimarans are really horrible to try and sail into the wind. So if the wind is coming at you, it's nearly impossible to get them to go anywhere.
Is it because there's so much weight on the sides?
That's a question for people who know things about boats.
Okay, I have a question, and we can circle back to this later if you want.
Sure.
What made him think that he was capable of this?
What a great question. I think, for the most part, in his past, he had done most of the things he wanted to do. And so my guess is that he was oriented toward, well, if I want to do it, I'll figure out how to do it. And like I said, he was legitimately smart, and so he would have had a lot of intellectual resources at his disposal, rather. And he had liked sailing since he was a child, so he'd read all of the sailing chronicles that I can't name because I'm not into that. The stories of people who sail, and he knew the language and the romance of it, right? I think it's a combination of him believing he can do anything and really believing in himself, which is great, but also sort of having this romantic idea about what it would be. Because he had only ever read about it rather than, experienced a storm. It's
like me with gardening.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of books.
Yeah.
I'm not that great at gardening.
Well, I've eaten your tomatoes, so I'll disagree with you there. But
all 3 of them.
If that's how you want to relate to it, I encourage. I like people who relate to Donald Crowhurst.
I do. I feel like I really relate to this. And on an artistic level, even more than just with gardening. But and maybe it's a white person thing, and it's probably a white dude thing. Of course I can do it.
Yeah.
I've done everything else.
Yeah. Limitless confidence with no foundation. White dude.
Right. And then on the horizon, anyone on the outside can see disaster looming.
Yeah.
You know what? Not to spoil it, but... Hey, guys. I just have a feeling this isn't going to go well for old Donnie Crowhurst, Good Time Charlie.
Yeah, so he doesn't have a boat that can do it. It's important to understand the Southern Ocean is just an enormous band of storms that circle the globe between 40 and 60 south latitude. The waves are regularly 30 feet tall, which is the size of a 2-story building.
Oh, wow.
So it's just 2-story buildings coming at you, one after the other, for about 4 months. And he's trying to set sail in a boat that's tiny. The size of boat a single person can sail has to be tiny because you have to be able to get everywhere quickly and do all the things.
And what you're saying is all the experts are looking at this boat and going,
well, his boat was not that much smaller than the boats of the other people who entered the contest. But they're all in tiny boats.
Right.
The thing is, the other people who entered were sailors. They had experience. And that matters. And also, they were sailing in tested boats. They each had a boat that they had either sailed solo extensively on their own, or that was of a similar design to a boat they had sailed extensively, whereas he designed a new boat that was not tested before he started the race. He had no experience sailing single-handed and basically just set himself up for disaster, but I guess thought maybe if he was plucky enough, he would be able to do it. I mean, it's optimistic.
I have a good personality.
Yeah, I mean, it's optimistic in a kind of beautiful way. I like that about him. So the Southern Ocean is not a place to be if you don't know what you're doing, is the point. So his idea with designing this boat is that his electronics firm wasn't doing great. He had a little bit of success selling electronic navigational aids to sailors. And so he decides he's going to design a boat and design all of the electronics. So basically put a computer in a boat for the first time to set it up so that he doesn't have to physically be out there adjusting sails in the wind. He'll set up this thing so that a blade will feed information to a computer that will relay to a pulley that will change the thing for him.
Which is pretty cool.
It is. But he started trying to do it in May when he had to leave by October, which, like, I can't clean my living room in 6 months. And he's trying to, he's trying to do all these things. So crazily optimistic. And as you said, probably a lot of colonial white dude in that.
But also probably something that is now the way it works, right?
Right.
So he was maybe ahead of his time.
Yeah,
but also woefully underprepared.
Right. And that's sort of my experience of him. That's a really great way of putting it. He's sort of he's between two times. He's lost in the romanticism of sailing, but also wanting to take all of the actual labor out of his sailing and looking forward to the future. And this is how we're going to do it in the future. And I'm going to bring us the future. But meanwhile, he doesn't know how to sail at all and couldn't hang his sails properly by the time he got out. They were hung back to front. The boat is delayed, the construction's delayed, because finding a shipwright who agrees to try and build a boat in 4 months is not a thing. Right. His inexperience is showing again, right? And so they're like, okay, we'll do it. We can't do anything else except work on your boat, and it can only go so fast, and there are delays, and it's a mess, and whatever. And Crowhurst as a captain, like, the other people who entered the race were, of course, interviewed after. And they were all like, you have to be organized. You have to know where your stuff is, and you have to know when you have to be done with certain things by certain times. And you're the one in charge of the running of the ship.
As far as you know, was he consulting people that knew more than him?
Well, the shipbuilders knew more than him. As far as I can tell, all of the conversations he had about it served either to give an impression that he knew more than he did. I'm sure he was taking information from them too, but he wasn't ever asking questions that I could tell. Of course, I wasn't present, and no reporters were present either. But it doesn't seem to me like he was actively trying to go and learn how to do it, because the image was that he already knew how to do it. So the sponsor he found, who was basically a used car salesman, says, yes, I'll pay for this boat to be built, but I need you to sign a contract. And the contract said that if you dropped out of the race early or failed to go, he had to buy the boat back. So there's now a financial incentive for him to continue. And like I said, he has 4 kids. He's not buying shit back. Yeah. Like, he got no money to buy a boat. This is how he got into this situation in the first place. The used car dealer says you have to buy it back from me if you end too early. Now, I don't know if the contract said specifically what too early meant or not, but it's definitely there as a pressure for him. His launch was a mess from top to bottom. It was built in one place. He had to sail it to another place to start. And he sailed it to that second place because his publicity agent was like, this new town called Teignmouth has more hotels and we can fit more newspaper people in, and you'll get more publicity if you start here. And so you should sail it down the coast and then do all of the last minute preparations here where we have good publicity, and then you can start from here. The journey was supposed to take 3 days, and it took 2 weeks.
Oh,
so
wow.
by the time he arrived, everyone was like, who's this fucking guy?
Yeah.
And it's all sailors. Like, it's a port town in England. They're all looking at him like, mother of God. Like, what is wrong with this dude? They talk about how there are 2 bars in the town for the sailors, this fishermen. And one of them was like the Crowhurst bar, who was like, he's gonna, like, optimism, he's gonna do it, we believe in him. And the other were the realists, who were like, what the fuck?
This guy's
You gotta
screwed.
be kidding me. There's no way. Yeah.
So what month are we in?
So he only got the boat to Teignmouth by like mid-October. He left, I think, early October for the supposedly 3 days.
So right at the deadline.
Right at the deadline. I mean, he's up against the wire the whole way. That took a long time. The BBC was recording him on the dock, and there are just piles of shit everywhere, and all kinds of workmen are in the boat and out of the boat and doing last-minute preparations, and everyone's in everybody else's way, and no one really knows what's going on, and Don Crowhurst doesn't know what's going on. He would, like, disappear off to run a random errand and be gone for 4 hours when people needed to consult him, you know? And even at that point, before he'd even gotten in the boat, the footage that the BBC took is like of a dude who cannot believe what he's gotten himself into. Like, he looks haunted already. It's really sad.
Wow.
It's really sad. He basically is like chewing his thumbnail, and like his face is all worried. And then they'd ask him a question, and he'd put on happy face while he turned the camera. But then as soon as it was over, he would go back and like be withdrawn. So he wasn't unaware of his predicament. He finally has to start because it's October the 31st. And if you don't start by then, you're not in the race. And before he's even out of the harbor, something happens. One of the sails was rigged improperly and got caught up on something else, so he had to climb the mast in view of everybody and fix something, and then he sails over the horizon. Spoiler alert, that's the last time his wife and children will ever see him.
Oh.
He goes very slowly at first because of boat things I don't understand. And then he picks up some speed because of other boat things I don't understand. Sometime in the first part of the journey, before he's even as far south as Spain, he realizes that none of the supplies that he had set aside for repairs ended up making it onto the boat. So
Oh, wow.
he doesn't have any extra plywood, he doesn't have any extra screws, he doesn't have any ability to fix things should something go wrong.
And he's not supposed to stop.
Yeah, if he stops, he's out. I mean, he can stop sailing, but he can't touch land, basically. Shortly after that, he realizes that his port forward hatch is leaking. And it's leaking enough that he has to go and bail it out by hand every couple days, depending on how heavy the seas are.
Oh, wow.
You can bail out a hatch by hand in the Atlantic when the weather's good. And if the storms in the Atlantic are long enough, you won't take on enough water to endanger you, and it'll clear up, and then you can bail and sail a little bit longer till the next storm. And then you can wait till the storm passes and bail it out again. You can do that in the Atlantic. You absolutely cannot do that in the Southern Ocean. You cannot face waves that are just going to sweep over the boat and be out there bailing one of your hatches by hand. It's just not a thing that's going to work. And he's an intelligent guy. He's like, oh no, like, he sees immediately what it means, right? But he has this financial obligation now, and he can't afford to buy the boat. And also, it'll be a little bit humiliating, you know? Like, I only made it to fucking Madeira.
Right, and I'm wondering which one was bigger for him.
Yeah.
That's something we'll never know.
So his journals, he wrote logbooks, right? Because you have to keep a log. And at some point after he realized the hatch was broken, he started keeping a second set of logbooks. And mostly it was things like journaling and here's what's happening now. And it's really interesting because the entire time he was traveling, there was a contrast between the recorded tapes and the film camera tapes that he was making for the BBC on his journey. They had given him equipment to do that, to send reports home.
So he had that, but nothing to fix his boat.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, hilarious. So and again, you see that dichotomy. When he's doing that, he's like putting on the show of being a bluff sailor, and he's singing shanties, and he's, waxing philosophical about the beauty of the sea. And then in his logbooks, he's like, I really don't know how long I can go on in the face of the actual situation. This thing is totally, he's like being honest with himself about what's happening. So he's got these two things, public face, private face, and this is when it really starts while he's on the journey. As he's sailing further south, let's say he makes it to off the coast of Africa. He's still in the Atlantic, obviously, and he realizes, okay, if I turn back, I'm financially ruined, and if I go forward, I'm dead. Those are the choices, because there's no way he can make it. And so in the face of those two choices, he decides on the third option. I will fake my around-the-world voyage. I will radio incorrect positions. I will create a fake logbook showing I was in places I wasn't. And I will tell the story of an around-the-world voyage, but I won't actually do it.
I mean, given those two options, I really don't blame him.
Correct. Me either. That's why I identify with this so much.
I don't want to die.
Right. I don't want to die or be dreadfully embarrassed.
Well, it's like socially die or physically die. Those are your choices. No, fake it, man.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
What is the third option? I love that, social death. But the thing is, other racers are dropping out. By that point, the three of the race leaders, one had a snap mast, one capsized, and one had like 28 days of storms and was like, fuck this, and retired. So at that point, it's not like he'd be alone in saying this is too much. Also around this time, I found out that he was still in radio contact at this point. And I found out that the used car salesman who made him sign the contract, he radioed because Crowhurst had said, I don't know, it's really challenging, this is what's happening, and he sort of misrepresented the level of damage on the boat. And the guy telegrammed back and said, no purchase necessary. You decide what you need to do. I'll revoke that clause. Don't worry about it.
So he had an out.
He had an out.
At least financially.
Uh-huh. But not socially.
And I should have asked you this earlier, but how many other boats were...
I think 9.
Okay.
9 started out. And of those, only one of them made it home. So he doesn't have that unconditional purchase clause anymore. He's free of that, but he's not free of the things that actually matter. And for a social gregarious creature, imagine going home and being the guy who kind of, remember that thing, that crazy bullshit you tried to do and failed at? So he started a fake logbook. Oh my God, this part is the one that absolutely kills me. He's already started the fake logbook. He knows he doesn't have to buy the boat, but he's moving forward anyway. And then he starts to lie about his position. So not only is he making a fake logbook, he's radioing people and telling them he's somewhere he's not. Now, he never outright lies. If you look at the content of his messages, and there's a great book called The Strange Last Voyage of Donald Crowhurst by Nicholas Tomlin and Ron Hall, that got a hold of every piece of paper related to him. They got a hold of his logbooks, they got a hold of his diary, they talked to his wife extensively, they talked to his friends. This is a really great piece of research. He never outright lies. He always is just like telling a story that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. And he's relying on people to interpret it the way they want, which is not the way, like off Brazil was one of them. Well, that could literally be anywhere in the South Atlantic off Brazil. Can you please be more specific?
So set the scene. Where is he at this point? Has he found a cape or a little cove to hang out in?
What a great question. So he's still moving. He's heading south, sort of down the coast of Africa, but far off the coast. It's called the Clipper Route, and it's the route that when there was only sailboats in the world, it's the route that they would sail around the world. And so it's not close to shore, because when you get close to shore, there are dangers. But at this point, when he starts to lie, he realizes he can't be spotted, and so he's staying away from the shipping lanes. Mm-hmm. So cargo's constantly moving back and forth across the Atlantic from South America to Europe, and America to Africa, and Africa to Europe. It's a really busy area in an X shape. But there are huge, 1,000-mile stretches of water down there that never see a boat. And so he's staying there so he can hopefully remain unspotted. Because as he's starting to radio fake positions, I think he kind of gets caught up in it a little bit, and his theatrical, maybe, side gets the better of him, and he claims that he logged 243 miles in a single day, which beats the record for that by 60 miles.
So if I'm going to the trouble, I might as well make this out as me being a total badass.
That's right. If I'm going to lie a little, I might as well see how good I can look, because, the damage is already done. For contrast, The person who won the race sailed about 95 miles a day. That's average.
Oh, wow. So that's a big lie.
And he claimed 243. And then he claimed a couple of other really big days after that. Now, he claimed days that made sense based on how his kind of boat, a trimaran, works in certain directions of wind and stuff. So it, like, everything he did made logical sense. It was a really neat package. And the way he presented everything was, like, just outside of the realm of easily believable. It wasn't a huge stretch. It was sort of just outside, and if you wanted to believe it and you looked at all the data, you say, well, it is possible. And he was really, I think, relying on that hope that we have. Like, I mean, it's possible that he did that. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, and this is where his background with sailing theory, having read a lot of books, might come in handy.
Yeah. At a certain point, he's occasionally radioing back and forth with various radio stations, sea monitoring stations. And he realizes that at a certain point, his fake route will take him past the Horn of Africa, past South Africa, and that the direction and strength of his signal will be completely wrong for the part of the ocean he's supposed to be in. And so he signals them and he says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to radio you anymore because something happened to the generator. I got to go to radio silence. I'll get back in touch when I can. I'm trying to save batteries or something. He's like, makes up a reason why he can't be in contact with them anymore. Also, right around that time, which is probably he's been at sea 2.5 months, so it's January, his reported position and his actual position are off by something like 1,600 miles. So if something does happen, he will never be found. He's so far away from where he's supposed to be. The jeopardy is sort of increased at that point. He's like, oh. And not only that, but I can't actually go where they think I am now. Like, the decision's been made for me. If I'm going this fast for this many days, they're going to assume I'm somewhere around here, which means if I radio and my signal's coming from somewhere else and is weaker than it should be, they're going to know I'm absolutely not where my report said I should be, and they're going to ask me questions, and I don't know how to answer them, and so he just cuts off communication. So he decides, in the middle of the water, I have an idea. Wait, I got an idea. You guys, listen. There's no one there. Totally talking to himself on the deck of the boat. Listen, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to float around in the South Atlantic for 4 months. And then I'm going to sneak in behind the people who actually did it. And that's how I'm going to get home. I'm going to claim that I sailed around the world, but I'm going to do it in such a way that there's no way I can win any of the prizes. And so no one will be that interested in looking at my logbooks, right? Because the logbooks are what they're going to look at. Like, okay, so when did you do this? Like, when did you take a sun sight to figure out A logbook is a really complicated document. It's direction and how many miles since the last time, latitude and longitude, and all of those things. And when you're sailing, it seems like it's a relatively straightforward thing to take a sun sight with an astrolabe and figure out where you are. But to fake it, you have to figure out where you should have been.
Right.
Somehow check the weather reports for that day. Because a log is everything. It's like conditions and radio messages you got and boats you saw and every single thing that happens. And so faking one is a mammoth undertaking. It would take months of really concentrated effort. Now, luckily, he now has several months to spare. And when he claimed the record, Sir Francis Chichester, the one who'd actually done the thing, immediately went to the race officials and was like, you should really check on that. I don't trust that dude. Like, he knew immediately. He's like, I got my eye on you, Crowhurst. And throughout this whole thing where he's still in fuzzy contact, Chichester's like, I really think his information needs to be examined at length when he returns.
Oh, he already knew.
He already knew, because he's an actual sailor. So he had originally brought 4 logbooks on board. And log 1 it was like England to Spain or whatever. And then, he would just go through them as he traveled. And they expected the journey to take about 9 months. That's how long it had taken Chichester. 9 months and 1 day, actually. So they knew that they would have to write down events for every single day for 9 months. So he brought extra stuff on board for that. In one of the logbooks, he created a complete account of his fake journey around the world. In log 1, he continued doing a fake log day to day, like for practice, kind of, I think. And then in logbook 2, he wrote where he actually fucking was. Because he needs to know so he doesn't run into shit, like islands. We found all of those logbooks but 1 at the end of things. So we know that that's what he was doing. This is a gregarious person. The life of the party. At this point, by the time he decides that he's just going to putter in the spring of 1968, alone in a boat in the South Atlantic. He's like 3,000 miles from anybody. Nobody around. Totally alone. Now, personally, I'm into that. That sounds like heaven. Oh my God, I don't have to talk to people for 4 months?
That's
Great.
my nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. But for people who like people, it's a nightmare. And I imagine it was for him. And also, he loved his wife. They had a good relationship. He loved his children. Like, he was writing notes to them in his logbook. I mean, it wasn't like he was a sociopath who didn't actually care about his family. He really cared about his family. And he wanted to get back to them alive. And, part of the pressure, right? He's got 4 young kids. I think they were all under 6 when he left. So he's alone for 4 months, and he goes a little fucking crazy. He goes a little crazy. As you would. Maybe not me, but as a normal person would. And the other thing is that if you're sailing single-handed and you're not lying about where you are, you can be in radio contact all day, every day. You can talk to every passing boat. You can talk to stations on shore. You can send telegrams via Morse code to people. You can be social. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't because he was lying. At this point, he's been in the South Atlantic for a couple months floating around. He hears a report that there are only 3 other people left in the race. And I think it makes him nervous, because 4th place, in a field of 9, only 4 return, even the 4th place guy is going to get some scrutiny. And so I think that actually ramped up his anxiety a little bit. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't say that in the book, but that's just me, the reincarnation of Donald Crowhurst, remembering what I did in a past life. And then his starboard float gets a split in it. He can't sail a straight course anymore because his float is taking on water. He has to sail in such a way to keep that float up out of the water, or he's going to drown 2,000 miles from anybody. So he can't sail a straight course anymore. He's like, that's it. I mean, it must have terrified him. I'm terrified thinking about it. I'm fucked. What am I going to do? And he does all those mental gymnastics we do when we have put ourselves into an impossible situation and now have to try and find a way out. He freaks, and then he's like, I have to fix it. I'm going to die if I don't fix it. And so he sails west off the coast of Argentina. He starts looking at his book of nautical maps for the right size village where he can put in, do repairs to the boat, and then set sail again. He's looking for a place that's too small to have a telephone, so they can't. I mean, he's literally like finding the right place to do it, because he's still at this point trying to maintain the lie. And it's different. So he finds a little and it's different because when he finds this little town, Rio Salado, in Argentina, it's very small. Unfortunately for him, it's also a hinterlands outpost of the Argentine Navy. And so there are people there who thankfully know about boats, which is good for him. But it's also not as desolate as he'd hoped. And they have a machine to speak with command relatively quickly. There's a telephone or machine. They have some kind of machine.
It's brand new technology.
To speak with other places. I think it's called a telephone. So he puts in at Rio Salado. And until he stepped off the boat in Rio Salado, he had not broken any of the rules. He had completely violated the corpse of the spirit of the race. But he hadn't broken any of the rules until he stepped off. And then once he did, I feel like that's another turning point. Like, now I'm a cheater. Before, it might have all just been a fun story he was spinning, and things got a little out of hand, and he never lied in any of his telegrams. And he steps off the boat, and now he's officially a cheater. And he was there for 2 days. Like, people helped him. He told them his name. He was on record as being on land. When he got the boat home, wouldn't they see that panels had been screwed to the exterior of his hull to repair things? How would he have done that in the Southern Ocean? Like, or is that something he then thought about? How am I going to fucking explain this repair?
Right.
You know? Because it would seem like if I walked down, I'd be like, bro, how did you glue and screw a plywood panel down below the waterline? How'd you do that, buddy?
Right.
You know?
And then that he used his real name, and maybe this goes along with the not lying thing, but I'd say I'm Donald Crowhurst.
My name's Charlie Goodtimes. I'm here to get my boat fixed. Yeah, well, I think, and this is why I actually like him. This is why he's sympathetic to me. Because I look at all of these details, and I see someone who really wants to do it right, and doesn't want to be lying, but, like, his own ego is just, like, making him make these horrible choices. But he's always trying to be honorable. Most of the time, you know?
He's got some principles.
He's a complex dude. the fact that he's doing this repair, I think, is, like, that's evidence to me that this mental instability is ramped up a little bit. Because you can't be thinking clearly. He wants to stay alive, that's clear, right? But you can't be thinking clearly if you're making repairs people are then going to ask you about. You're making a fake logbook, so they don't ask you about it. You're trying to come in last, so they don't ask you about it. But then you have repairs that are going to... I guess he was hoping people just wouldn't care that much.
Maybe.
Right? But he needs them to care a little bit, because he was going to live the rest of his life selling these gadgets that he had designed for his single-handed round-the-world race to other sailors. Like, his financial future was dependent on him being a hero.
Right, so that's the other thing he sees going down the toilet in this moment.
Yeah. The repairs are made, and he sets off again. Now he sets off heading north, because he told everyone in Rio Salado that he was headed back to England. He told them he was part of a race. God damn it, Donald. Can't you lie at the right time, buddy? He told everyone he was part of a race and he had to get back to England, so he sailed north so they would think he was going to England. But his plan required him to, once out of sight of land, take a big circle and head south again, because he had to get video footage of Cape Horn, or no one would believe that he had done it. Like, you had a tape recorder and you had a video recorder and you didn't record your passage around the Horn. We don't believe you did it. So he sailed south into really dangerous water, but his boat was repaired, so a little better. He sailed south. He probably fixed the port hatch too at this point. Sailed south and took footage of Cape Horn so that he could show people. And then he puttered a little bit and waited for reports. Okay, now I have timed it appropriately. I am far enough behind the race leaders to not win either prize. No one's going to look at my stuff. He was, like, calculating how far they would have gone and looking at weather reports and, like, doing all of this basically calculus, trying to figure out when he should break radio silence and say, I'm here! I'm back! Everything's great! And he figured it out, and he slipped in, and everything was great. Now, here is the part of the story that makes me know this man was cursed by the gods. Like, Greek tragedy style, straight up cursed. Everything that happens up to this point happened because of who he was and decisions he made. That's a human failing, and I totally understand it. That's why I love the story so much. But at this point, the gods of the sea are like, fuck you, buddy. Because the person who was in the lead, Robin Knox Johnson, he made it home. Yay, he's a Briton. He's the first person to do it. Woohoo, big hero. Great. One man down. The second person in the race was a Frenchman called Bernard Moitessier. And this guy would have been our friend, Claire. He's a poet. He took beautiful footage on his boat. He lashed the camera to the top of his mast.
GoPro.
Had it exactly.
He invented the GoPro.
He invented the GoPro. So the ocean's moving and you can see him on the boat, and then he's writing things like, it's so good to be like an animal and lay in the sun and belch when you're full and take a nap under the stars. I mean, he's a great writer. And he has sailed, his boat was called Joshua, and I actually read his books because of the couple of quotes of his in this documentary. He loves the ocean so much, and it changed his values so much, Moitessier, that he almost made it back and would have had the fastest time and the money. But he turned around off the coast of Spain and decided he didn't want to ever go back to Europe, and he kept fucking sailing around the world. He made it all the way to Tahiti before he put in. He sailed around the world 1.5 times.
Damn artists.
And exactly. I love this guy. So Moitessier is like, I don't care about the money. I'm going to turn around. The guy who is in third, sorry, I'm laughing at a joke I wrote, which is going to ruin the joke, and it's not that funny anyway, was a guy called, I can't even say it. It's not that funny. I'm going to have to cut all of this. A guy called Nigel Tetley, who sailed in a boat made of tea. Isn't that funny?
I like it.
It just charmed me.
It's cute.
He was a real sailor. He was sailing a trimaran too, and he was going very fast. He had actually sailed it, and so his boat was fucking falling apart at this point. He heard Crowhurst broke radio silence and was like, there's no chance I can overtake anyone. I'm not going to win any of the prizes, but I'm here and I'm coming and I'll see you all soon, basically. Tetley's people hear this and say, you need to hurry. Crowhurst is on your tail. You need whatever. So he pushed his boat and pushed, and it ended up breaking up under him one night.
God.
And he had to be fucking rescued.
How close was he?
America, like north of the equator. Pretty close, all things considered. And Crowhurst is behind him and he hears the news and he's like, given all the lies I've told, I'm going to win the prize for the fastest time. So he stops sailing. He just lets the ship drift. And he starts riding. And he writes for like a week. He lets his chronometer run down, so he doesn't know what time it is. He lets other things that are battery powered run down, and he has no way of recharging them. They're like generator style, you know? You can keep it going, but once it's dead, it's dead. He lets everything run down. And he's writing. And he's writing shit like, during his lifetime, each man plays cosmic chess against the devil. Each man can decide for himself who has won. The moves of the game are all well known. It is a difficult game to follow who is winning the game because God is playing with one set of rules and the devil with the other exactly opposite set of rules. And he writes like that for 6 days. Man is forced to certain conclusions by virtue of his mistakes. No machine can work without error. The only trouble with man is that he takes life too seriously. But that's coherent. That's coherent. It's like grandiose and there's a lot of posturing there, but it's like sensible. And it's hanging, all the writing he's doing at this point is hanging to logic.
I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing a sane person who thought they were going to die would write.
Uh-huh. Couple more days pass, and now it's late June. So he's going crazy in late June of 1968. So he's been at sea roughly 7 months. Couple days after that, he's completely lost the plot. He starts writing down the exact hour, minute, and second that he's writing things, and everything is broken up by pieces. 10:28:10, only requirement for have new set of rules is that there is some. 10:29, understand reason for need to devise games. No game man can devise is harmless. And then at the end of this stuff, I will only resign this game if you will agree that on the next occasion that this game is played, it will be played according to the rules that are devised by my great God, who has revealed at last to his Son not only the exact nature for the reason for games, but also revealed the truth of the way of the ending of the next game. It is finished. It is finished. It is the mercy. And about 2 minutes after that, he grabs the 4th logbook, where he had written his fake account, and took a walk in the sea.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he took the fake logbook with him.
Uh-huh. But he very carefully laid out all of the other evidence of his deception. He wasn't trying to pretend that he'd done it. He laid out his, like, other fake things. He laid out journal entries where he's like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. He had accounts of the receipts from Argentina. Like, he was like, I want everyone to know the whole picture, but I can't fucking face anyone. And I can't have the number one piece of evidence of this massive deceit I have perpetrated against everyone who knows me and loves me, the logbook. I can't have that be around. I'll tell them I lied, but I won't show them how much effort I went to do it and how close I came. And I think he died honorably because of that. But Jesus Christ, dude. I mean, saying Jesus Christ, dude, and wow somehow is like a deflation, I think, of the story. I don't really have another response, though.
Well, it's fascinating to me that he took the third option, as you said, in order to not die. Mm-hmm. And then that third option is what ended up killing him, in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
He made a choice. And then I also always wonder, maybe it's creativity or madness in myself, but I always wonder if the madman knows something.
Yeah.
So when he says the game has been revealed to me in the next game, I wonder, like, did he know something? And that made it okay for him to do that, in his mind.
I found out several years after I first came across this story that he's not a psychiatrist, I think he's a psychologist, whose last name is Podval, actually wrote a chapter of a book on psychosis about Donald Crowhurst. Because you can look at his writings and see the grandiosity and the complete detachment from reality and all of these things. And so he's kind of a case study for what happens when you go batshit.
Death by humility.
Something like that, yeah. So, before we end, you know how I said earlier that his mother dressing him as a girl until he was 7 wasn't relevant to the story? Well, that's still true. It's not relevant. But here's where my particular kind of crazy comes in, which is when they left England, they would have gone by sea. They would have been in an ocean liner to travel from India, or when they left India, they would have traveled via ocean liner to England. So he would have been 7 or 8 years old on an ocean liner in the Southern Ocean. He never touched the water of the Southern Ocean, but he did travel on it by boat. What if little Donald Crowhurst, the bravest boy in the world, woke up one night from his cabin and didn't feel like staying in the cabin and went out on the deck of the ship. And what if there was a moon and he looked at the water and he sensed the gods of the sea and tried to talk to them? And that's what, like, he's like, sailboats, I have it, this is it. And they noticed him. Maybe the fact that they noticed him on that voyage is what made him sign up for this race in the first place. Maybe they built something in him at that moment to make him want to come back to them. And then when he started lying, they heard him. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they spoke to Bernard Boitessier, who also understands the ocean, and they told him he shouldn't go home. And then they caused the storm that sunk Tetley's boat. And then Crowhurst came back to them when he walked off the edge of his boat. Yeah, that's my particular kind of crazy.
The cosmic storytellers.
Wikipedia, poor Donald Crowhurst ends up with a Wikipedia calling him an English businessman and amateur sailor. And that's what he gets. Well, thank you for listening to me again.
Yes.
I promise I won't tell you that story.
So how has this evolved for you over the years? Because I know you've said you've studied this story and you've retold this story. So I'm just curious, what is important to you now versus what was interesting to you in the first place?
Thank you for asking that. I've definitely watched it evolve in me, and as I tell it drunk at the bar every now and then. It started off like, oh my God, look at what people fucking do to ourselves. Look at all the things he thought he should be, and then what he actually was, and oh God, it's just so painful. And now, like, my crazy's taken over a little bit, and because it's remained important to me, I'm like, well, I'm going to give it a little bit of extra weight, and that's why I'm like, there's some deal he made. Like, there's some, like, spiritual backing for this. I don't really think he talked to the gods of the ocean, because I don't think there are gods of the ocean. But there's some kind of, like, human being in nature and our relationship to nature and the deals we make about what's possible for us and what we think is impossible. He was capable of doing great things. This was a man who was legitimately capable of doing something great with his life. And he was in his mid-30s and he hadn't done it yet. And I definitely identified with that when I first heard the story. I was like, oh yeah, and I know how close I was to doing some crazy shit when I was like, I have to figure something out, right? And I kind of admired that if he was feeling what I was feeling, that stuck feeling, I kind of admired that he chose something so outrageous and huge to try and do, because I would never do that. I would pick something safer. I mean, almost everything is safer than that, so of course I would pick something safer than that. But that impulse to, like, the impulse to the grand gesture is endearing to me, particularly in people like mid-century Englishmen who were absolutely not allowed to do that, really, you know?
There's a lot of bravery in that, and stupidity.
Yeah.
Which is so human.
Yeah. Very human. Like a final postscript, I definitely want to mention this. The person who won the race, Robin Knox Johnson, he was the first man home, and when Crowhurst's boat was discovered and he wasn't, and they figured out what happened, Robin Knox Johnson also won the 5,000 pound prize. He gave it to the Crowhurst family.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and everyone who talks about it, like a lot of the news reports, like some of them were a little mean, particularly for the time, which was much gentler in tone, I think, in the media, but most people were like, oh, the poor guy. Oh, the poor guy. Just nothing but empathy for it, which I think is kind of beautiful.
It's beautiful, but it also makes it sad.
Yeah.
Because that's what he didn't expect to find, was empathy.
That's right. So where, like, was he so unempathetic with himself that he just couldn't imagine that people would ever forgive him for this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
poor guy.
Poor guy. So they found his boat, and it's actually still on an island in the Caribbean somewhere. It's just pulled up. There are photos of it in the book. It's still just hanging out there rotting in the sun, which I think is pretty cool. They're like, we don't want it here. It's a piece of shit. Like that was the whole problem.
But it didn't
just
work
leave
out.
it. Just leave it.
So for people who would be interested in learning more about this crazy story.
This crazy story. So the documentary that I love, the video documentary, is called Deep Water, and I don't know who produced it, sorry.
But it's on YouTube.
But it's on YouTube, and you can search it by Deep Water. And the book that covers this the best, I think, there are a couple, but the one that's the best is The Strange Last Voyage of Donald Crowhurst by Nicholas Tomlin and Ron Hall. Thanks, Claire. Thanks for coming by and let me tell you something.
Yay!
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyou podcast@gmail.com.